Okay, it looks like we're live from the DML event in, I believe, Irvine, California. We have Alan Levine on site hosting Dr. Kim Jaxon. So why don't we let you introduce you from on site, and then we'll go quickly around the virtual room and let people introduce themselves. Alan, what's your favorite day of the week?
That's a ridiculous question, Ken. I like them all. I don't know. I don't have any concept of weekends. That's when you're
I was gonna say I just work all the time, so there's not every day is a favorite day of the week.
We're like Hallmark. Today is my favorite day of the week.
Going up on a Thursday.
I don't want to talk much because Kim is so cool, and I'm glad she could join
thanks
us.
for inviting me. Yeah. Are we doing actual introductions? Is that what you want from us?
Sure. Why don't you do an actual introduction? Watching,
and so we can meet all the other virtual people there. I'm in Chico in Northern California normally. I drove the 8 hours down to get to hang out with Alan at DML. And I'm an associate professor, and I mostly think about literacy and work with future teachers, and kind of a self-proclaimed geek. And the Digital Media and Learning Conference is probably the favorite thing I go to, like really, for real. I think they have access and equity at their core, and never forget that. So while it looks like it's a digital thing, it's really it's always where my thinking is pushed on access to digital things.
I'd agree. It's one of my favorite going the last 2 years. A lot because of that. A lot because of the sessions are generally not very present-y like.
Yeah.
There's a lot more panel discussion, and there's a lot of hands-on sessions. And,
right.
and also it's broader than just higher ed. There's a lot, especially with the focus on youth education. So there's some really great projects.
Right. Often bringing together, museums and librarians and in-school, out-of-school innovative work too. And time to make or talk, so it doesn't feel like you're at a research presentation, even though there's plenty of research behind all the conversations.
But don't get excited. Apparently, this is the last conference.
Well, it's the last of this iteration,
branded.
But it's going to be branded and combined with other cool groups of people to do the Connected Learning Summit starting next August.
Great. So why don't I go virtual room here and let people introduce themselves. Why don't we go with Jeffrey, and then we'll go with Nate, and then we'll go with the folks on site from Keene.
Hi, I'm Jeff Javalt, and I run Young Writers Project, which is now starting its 12th year, working with thousands of kids, mostly online, but a lot in person, and we're based in Vermont.
Thanks, Jeffrey. And why don't we go with Nate? Nope, I think we have no audio from you, Nate. We forgot to test that. You can mime it. It's all right. We'll go to the Kane as well. Why don't you introduce your folks down there? You'll have to unmute and come in.
Hi. All right, so we're Writing Studies Master students from Kane University. I'm Haley.
I'm Rashonda. I'm Laura. I'm Catherine.
And I'm Marissa.
Excellent. So do you have questions about what we're doing here with the virtually connecting and what's going on site of the conference, besides watching Alan?
They get enough of that, Ken.
No? No? Point question? Can you want to test again, Nate, and see if we got the audio? No, he's silent.
He's silent. Okay, cool.
So why don't you let us know what's going on, Alan?
What's going on? First day of the conference.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great keynote by Dana Boyd, who F-bombed and told us, scared a lot of people, but with her frankness. And she alluded a lot of the strategies that are like beyond the simple label of just fake news. And it's a lot, a lot of it is borrowed. I think the big flip I had was when she talked about like the people doing this kind of play on the idea of critical thinking, because they put out this message that be a critical thinker, like question all mainstream media. And the way people do this generally is they do a Google search and they form their ideas off of their search results instead of like actually inquiring into them. And so it's kind of almost turned inside out or perverted in a way, the idea of critical thinking for people to be these self-investigators.
And it was really interesting to start with Dana's talk this morning, because we tend to be kind of fanboys and girls of digital things at the Digital Media and Learning Conference. And so we, of course, want to see the potential for democratic ideas and people being heard from marginalized groups who can't be heard in other ways. And so we get really excited about the possibilities and the affordances of and Dana really complicated that this morning, and it was a smart way to, I think, start the conference, because it's going to force us to be a little more critical, because she really did talk about the bad and the ugly, including the Gamergates and Pizzagates and all the dark side of the web and the way people have organized on the web. So, and she has such a great background in terms of both someone who understands the coding side of it, someone who's worked in industry, someone who works with the big players, and then does this beautiful deep dive into research. So it was a great way to start, because it complicated the woohoo, this is all great, as we went into our sessions.
She talks really fast, but it's good.
Oh, so it was great. And it was streamed live, and I'm sure will be archived to also, I would imagine it will be available to view at a later time. I would be surprised if it wasn't.
Yeah, I hope so.
I hope so. Did everybody up?
I mean, I think people asked, what's our, how are we complicit in this by what we share on our social media, for example, was a really good question. And yeah, a little bit of, do we have to shut it all down to rebuild the infrastructure? Yeah, I think there was a little bit of a alarmist.
I'm not
alarmed.
I'm
always alarmed, but I mean, I'm not, from a literacy scholar's perspective, there's a little bit of, and she alluded to this, that there's always, every time a new technology is introduced, we have to sort out what to do. It's in its adolescence still in many ways. And so I think the hopeful part of her call was that as qualitative researchers and as educators, we better be working for creating cultures of kindness, or thinking about how we do research on the web that's thoughtful. So I was also hopeful. I wasn't ready to run away from, but that's not fair for me to say, because I'm positioned differently.
And maybe from, just so well, everybody knows, especially my students, who several of them are interested in becoming teachers. Yeah. Kim works a lot in teacher education. Yeah. I'm wondering what you think the implications are for people in that field.
Yeah. Well, I wish that future educators would, I wish they participated in these spaces, because I think the only way to really start to complicate the spaces and see both their affordances and their problem is to be a member of those communities. So, I mean, I think one of the reasons that Dana's research is so rich is she's not like, she's on all those spaces as well as a participant. So, I would hope that educators are seeing what Jonathan Worth would say, where the fish are swimming, so where young people are, and would also be in those spaces as well. So.
Yeah, Jeff is asking, we did get the text up, so they're all taking notes. Jeff is asking if what you think are some of the most effective techniques for teaching writing in digital spaces, which I think my students are interested in too.
Because they're all writing studies with Mia, who is awesome. They're like, they couldn't be closer to my people.
I mean, no, and to double on that, I think a lot of the questions my students are asking me are like, if I do this media thing, is it a legitimate academic exercise? Because several of them want to go into PhD programs, right. and this feeling that there's sort of like real writing and this kind of fun, interesting stuff.
Well, I hope it's shifting. I mean, certainly in my field, in composition studies or in literacy studies or whatever, there's a shift to what counts as an academic piece. I mean, I think it depends on how conservative the institutional space, what counts. I mean, it's interesting, that question coming from Jeff, because you have one of the coolest sites for young writers.
Yeah, I didn't tell him that we showed it as an example yesterday.
And I knew about it. Yeah. I know this site. I mean, I would say generally I'm a fan. It's in terms of writing digitally or supporting students to write on the web. I'm a fan of them both using composing practices that work for them. So I would never be one who would argue that they should use X tool. Like, I would want to know what their composing practices are, and if they start in a pen and paper, then that's great too. But I often work with them to say that what the digital can afford is to be heard, and to connect with communities of practice that they hope to join. So every time they blog, we talked about this yesterday in the workshop, every time my students are in a digital space blogging or tweeting or sharing a video or a piece that they did, they often get feedback from the author they're reading or from another teacher, another peer. And so I think there's an affordance to putting your stuff out there in the public where you can get feedback from communities that you want to hang out with. But doesn't mean everything has to live there. And I would hope, I don't think it's ever about the tool. I don't think it's about teaching them one particular tool. It'll change too fast.
Plus, a little bit, I know from some of my conversations with my students, like they're starting in their academic, they're well in their academic career, but they're starting this process of doing, a thesis project. And there's this somewhat of a feeling of like, what if my idea isn't so great, or what if people like ridicule or
that never goes away.
Look how comforted they are.
No, that never goes away. I think there's a little like, oh my God.
But it should almost never be a personal attack.
Right. So actually the students that you all are doing some really, from what, I've been able to, and Alan talking to me, I would encourage kind of a playfulness around your theses and doing something different, because I think that's where the field is moving, and you're going to, you should push against some of those old school ways of delivering a thesis if you have the freedom to do so. As you move into your academic career, depending on the institutional space, sometimes I have a balance in my CV of more traditional peer-reviewed paper journals where probably 4 people read the thing, and then blogging for DML that has a much bigger audience, right? So I would balance the kinds of genres that you work in, but I would encourage you in a thesis to take some chances.
Would you say like in a master's thesis, there's more flip it, in a PhD dissertation, you're probably going to be more formal anyhow, right? Or is that not true?
No, and it depends on the school. It's funny, I got my master's at Chico State, and they were way more rigid about 12-point font, Times New Roman, had to be this thing. And Berkeley was like, if you could keep it consistent, that'd be great. Like it was almost like the research ones had more freedom to like play with new ideas. So that's interesting too. And I think especially PhD programs in writing studies are going to want to see cool, innovative, interesting ways of representing your ideas. A journal like Kairos, I don't know if you all know Kairos, like that's where we work with multimedia and ways of multiple genres, and so there's certainly already a long tradition of that in writing studies.
And Nate's referencing the person who did their dissertation as a graphic novel. That's Nick Susanis.
Yeah, right.
Who's really great. Who I know a little bit and might be able to bring to us, but he totally did his entire PhD.
Awesome.
In a graphic. I can't even say comic. It's an epic production.
Yeah, Nate, that's a good one.
Called and he also, I forget if it was called, or he has a book about it called Unflattening.
Okay, Nate's about to tell us all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so Nick is a cool guy.
Other stuff.
Yeah. Do any
other stuff.
Any of the students kind of want to, like, because Kim is like, she advises, she's a writing studies expert, unlike me.
Don't say that. None of us self-identify.
Well, I kind of,
a writing studies poser.
The Kane students labeled you a digital pioneer, Alan.
Yeah, well, it's easier to.
That just means I'm old, so that doesn't really count.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. I'd like to hear from the Kane student. I mean, it would be cool to just hear you all talk about some of the projects that you're working on, if that was on the table to do.
Sure, this is a seminar.
Yeah.
I make them do it all the time, and they actually seem to like it.
Yeah.
gosh, I'm here getting feedback. I was the one who Alan connected us through email, and my thesis is basically I'm interested in the digital humanities. Like Dr. Zamora kind of got me interested when I first got to King, and I'm interested in seeing how maybe high schoolers would react to some of the tools that can be used. So like I've thought about Hypothesis and Google Ngram and just like Voyant and Wordle and just tools like that. I think it'd be really interesting to bring that to a younger age to maybe see what impact that would have to younger students who could then take that into master's and PhD work instead of finding out about it later on in the game. And then I think the importance of doing so is to talk to the teachers, like to educate educators so they're able to help students. So my thesis is kind of like trying to compile different tools so that teachers can teach students what's out there in the digital humanities.
So, you know, Marissa, I'd also turn to someone like Kathy Davidson's work at Haystack. Long ago, she had this syllabus that was about new literacies, and she's going to argue, as a lot of us will, that it's not going to ever be about the tool per se, because it changes too fast, but that what those tools that you just named are pointing to are ways of being, like practices of literacy. So what Hypothesis affords is a, collaborative distributed cognition model for thinking about reading and writing. And so what you'd want to think about maybe with teachers or with students are those larger practices. And then once, it seems like when people have an understanding of like what are you trying to do, then their tool understanding can be more intentional, or how they use a tool can be more intentional. But that's not to say for your thesis that you don't have to pick specific ones right now that model these kinds of practices or ways of being or ways of reading text do for you. But and I'll send you the link too, since I already have your email for Kathy Davidson stuff. So she's going to argue that what would be important right now is to think about how there's a shift in what counts as an author, how there's a shift in collaboration, how there's a shift in thinking about what counts as attention or paying attention, and that those kind of bigger ways of being would be interesting to look at.
That's why maybe like coming up like families of tools, like in terms of functionality, like you're talking about Ngram and Voyant as kind of text analysis, and maybe there's some other like these are different ways that you can explore novels.
So I might give them those, like what Alan's pointing to is almost like a big bin, like a bigger bucket name. Like these are text analysis tools. These are collaborative tools. That might be a way to also not make your thesis out of date in 6 months, because we've all done that. Like, every time, you hear someone reference MySpace and everybody groans in the room. Like, if they just would have said a social media platform, then I don't know. Sometimes it's good to name it. Right? So yeah.
But I know that. What's that? Okay.
How you doing now?
Maha's here. This is Maha Bali, who I was telling you about that we designed this for. But she can't turn on audio. Okay.
I just muted you. That's I think.
Boy, you're going to be in trouble, Ken, if you mute Maha.
I know.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's great. Somebody type in that it's great to see her.
Yeah.
It is excellent. It is excellent.
Marissa, I think it'd be cool too to, ask students what they're using. Ask the high school students what they're already using, because I guarantee that they're using things outside of the classroom that teachers are often not aware of, that they've got all kinds of rich practices outside of school that they're doing with digital tools that if you just ask them, so what do you use? And they'll say things like, oh, I work in iMovie and I work in this and I use the, you're like, oh, crap.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
But I think you're still going to stick with sort of exploring the dystopian genre.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
That would be like to approach the tool because it's my favorite genre of literature.
Mia was here. She dropped out. I muted you again, Alan, because there was lots of echo for the folks at Kane State as well.
Mia was here for a moment.
She waved at us.
Yes, she did.
Yes.
The tears started and then she left.
She literally popped in and out.
So Kim, while we're waiting for the reappearance of Mia and Maha, if they do come back, I am curious as to, we got started largely because college presidents felt that kids couldn't write their way out of a paper bag when they got into college. And it is still among a lot of the college presidents that we deal with, they still see it as an enormous problem as to why kids drop out. I'm just kind of curious as to what you see. Do you think kids are properly prepared to just write when you get them early on, or has it gotten worse? Has it gotten better?
I don't think it's any worse or any better. You know, we've been screaming "Get off my lawn" since we invented the writing, right? Like Socrates in the Phaedrus was afraid that literacy would ruin all memory. So we've been worried about people's writing since we've had writing. So I've taught about 20 years freshman comp, and in fact, here's where I think that's getting better is that the students are at least coming to Chico State have a real sophistication around the use of things like everything from Google Docs to this range of platforms, and they certainly understand audience, like the needing to shift how they do something for school versus how they say something to a friend. So I don't think it's any better or worse. I don't think the testing mechanisms that place them in university remediation systems are very good. Like they aren't a very good indicator of who needs help. And I think everybody needs help. I mean, I think anybody who's trying to write something complicated could use the support structure to do that writing. So if I'm trying to write a grant, an NSF grant for the first time, I'm going to have to go to examples and phone a friend and get some feedback and pass it around, just like any nascent writer would need, particularly when they're trying to write across multiple disciplines. So yeah, is student writing problematic? Sometimes, yes, but I also see it as they're newcomers who are being asked to do so many different kinds of things with writing, and you can't do it efficiently or quickly. What's great about your site is that it's a real public audience, it's like real it's writing that goes on in the world, and it's not like writing for school that gets all funky too. So no, I have lots of hope. In fact, one of the most magical things I'm noticing, Chico State became a couple years ago a Hispanic serving institution, so we have a lot of heritage speakers in our school. Because first language is often, Spanish or Hmong is our two main populations. And I'm starting to see this beautiful, especially in their creative writing, this beautiful weaving of a couple of languages, because sometimes things don't translate very well or so tidy. And it's just enriching their writing. Like if you don't try to strip that away, it's like some really beautiful structures. And it's pushing on my own abilities as a writing instructor. That's been kind of cool.
Okay.
Did Mia come back? No.
No. She's probably getting ready for the next session because it's from Hangout.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was sent her a message on Twitter. She hasn't answered.
Okay. We'll work it out.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to kind of give a high-level view of your
what
project?
you're doing?
I love them all.
And it's also good practice.
Rashonda just blogged about it. I haven't read it yet.
Okay, so my thesis topic it feels like it's kind of changed in these last 4 weeks more than it did when I first came up with the idea. But right now, kind of looking into what ways does writing for and writing in digital spaces kind of enhance creative and reflective processes. Like I have a lot of my topic is centered in like the literature is centered in like race and composition, gender and race and writing, and I'm kind of moving toward a more reflective and more ethnographic lens with my research. But I also want to have the digital poetry e-lit piece on the side. So it's very much centered in electronic literature, even though it started out much broader in the classroom, just kind of looking and wondering if introducing something like electronic literature, the theory behind it, the literature behind it, and then how to make an ELIT piece, if introducing that to students would help with their digital literacy, and would affect anything, how it would impact that. But I feel like I'm moving more into like a reflective process kind of realm, and looking into like voice and identity, race and gender. So it's really interesting. It's not completely solidified, but I'm getting there.
That's really cool.
Sorry.
Yeah.
She said it was very cool.
I said
3
that's
times.
Right. Yeah, I did. I was like, man, that's some cool. That's really smart.
And maybe, you know, I think, you know, some help on like thinking about how do you talk and write and research about the reflective process.
Yeah. So do you know George Hillock's work? Hillock's, Hillocks. Yeah. So that would be, he's got this book that I only know books by their color. It's green and red. It's got reflective writing practice in the title, and it's kind of the go-to, George Hillock's, for that kind of the work you want to do. And then, you know, when Alan was originally telling me about your work a couple of nights ago, it seemed to me that, like Jody, if you don't know Jody Shipka's work in composition, she wrote a book called Toward a Composition Made Whole. But she also has just a ton of different pieces that I turn to. And what I like about Shipka's work is she's interested in, and when you talk about things like voice and identity and kind of our positioning and gender and race and how that all plays into it, she's interested in how students have control over the parts of their composing process. So she would want a student to have control both over the choice of the issue, how they're going to write it, in what form it will take, how it's distributed, how it circulates. And we rarely give students that opportunity, right? We give them a prompt, we tell them it's due on Google Docs, we tell them what day it's due, and we tell them, you know, I'm going to be the one who reads it. We don't give them control over anything. It may be the choice of topic. And so, so what if a student who is trying to play out things like race and identity and all those things, how would that be more like illuminated by them having control over all the aspects of their writing, right? Would it highlight things you hadn't seen? So I really like her work for that reason. And it's hard to do in teaching. Like it's hard to turn, like you could just do anything. Like you can't teach it like that, right? Just, you know, write anything you want on any kind of piece of paper. Like it's not easy to do. And I have some, and at some point I can send you some stuff that like how that is enacted in the classroom.
She's cool. She's gold.
So yeah, cool stuff.
So I just wanted to build on the voice and identity idea. Now I'm getting feedback, but you know, it's we work a lot with kind of the start, which is helping kids like notice they're actually noticing something, and then turning what they're noticing into articulate what they're noticing in a way that's well received, which we think is the basic digital literacy. And I just am so happy to hear you say, like, what school does in a sense. It tells you what to do. It tells you what platform to use. Here's the deadline and how much it's going to count on your grade, and how important it is to do it exactly the opposite, which is to give kids plenty of time to develop the idea and figure things out and almost figure their own feelings around those ideas, and then to put drafts and share, and then have some other reason for doing it other than a grade, which is, of course, audience. Someone's going to read my stuff. Someone's going to hear my stuff. It's going to see my stuff. So I'm so happy you said that, and thank you.
Yeah, and you know what, George, I think you're onto something too. I mean, I know your site is too. Onto the time factor of it. I think about how many times we ask students, particularly in higher ed, like first year comp, to start with a question. Like start with a research question. And I mean, as y'all would know at Kane, like this is not, I don't start with a question. You know what I mean? It takes me a really long time to get to the question. Like I start with an area of interest and I read voraciously, and then I'm like, oh, they're framing it differently than I do. You know, right? It takes a long time before a question emerges, and certainly forever before I'm ready to make a claim about something. And yet we often ask in the writing process, what's your question? And what's your claim about it? It's like, well,
they're all nodding because that's what I've been asking them to do.
And that's why it's just starting to emerge, or it changes over time, because I don't know. What I kind of know is an area or a problem, or I love George's, or a noticing that's puzzling me, and I got to sit with that for a while. I mean, in academia, most of us, it takes us 1.5 years to get something published. I don't write something in 20 minutes. Well, email. Nothing. I'm gonna get turned over. Yeah. I'm gonna mute us now.
Okay. Yeah, we're probably
getting up on time as well. Nate had a quick question. I was going to see if Nate could get that in.
Hey, is my audio working now?
Yes. Ooh, yay! Yay!
I had to switch to a non-Google browser to get Google Chrome to work, or Google Hangouts to work. At any rate, especially coming off for people who managed to see Dana Boyd's keynote this morning, or can later go look at the video that we posted in the chat there. I'm especially interested in maybe Kim, your thoughts, and anybody else too, maybe Jeffrey, about a domain of one's own, and how you think about that as an enabling practice for literacy and or writing.
Oh, so it's bad for me because I'm kind of a fangirl of domain of one's own. So I mean, I'm on the rants. I'm positioned in a conference where I would be surrounded by people in agreement that I actually think we need to support students and our faculty and whoever in the world to stake their claim. It's why the session we did yesterday was stake your claim on the open web. I don't think, and I think you're right, coming off of Dana's talk this morning, I'm going to help people understand even the perils of the web if we don't let them play on the web. So I'm not a fan of the learning management system because you're not playing for real. You're not learning like what you do about spam. You're not learning that you put something out there and it's material and it has consequences. And, you know, there's just a lot of practices that we all learn by really mucking around in the world of the web. And so I like domain of one's own because I think it's an interesting framework for, I think, helping people understand that there's this huge piece and you can like take a part in it and have something to say. It's very Burkean, right? It's very Kenneth Burke, stick your oar in kind of thing. So I'm hopeful that it would also give universities that a domain of one's own, or something like Reclaim Hosting or whatever, would give universities a framework that helps them see it's not so scary to do that too.
But I would say that it's more than just setting that up and say, here's your domains.
Yeah.
Go be individuals. The stuff I remember from UMW when it first started is that some students really said it didn't really make sense until they had used it in the context of a class where the writing and the publishing were part of something that made sense versus just like, here's your domain, go make some websites.
Yeah.
And so I think it's more important for people to be writing and reflecting first. And so that's why with most of my students, I start with WordPress.com and Blogger. Just get some writing and publishing under your skin. You can always move it into a domain later.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's true.
I agree.
So,
all right.
So just real quick, I mean, I think we're believers of the community, and to what extent the community can shape someone's creativity. So in our history, we've had something like 400,000 posts, and they've been really on the edge in the terms of the topic, a lot of them, but they've all been respectful. And so the kids protect that space because they know they can take a creative risk in it and not get hammered. But I think all of our community leaders and our mentors, all of the real active kids, have presences elsewhere. And it's really a lot of fun to see what they do elsewhere with other mediums. So I think there should be lots of domains.
I think we have to go because we have.
Yeah. I was gonna say if you had anything to wrap up, Alan and Kim, and then you can dial in with Mia.
We're gonna be back in like 10 minutes on the other hangout.
Like 5. Excellent.
Thank you.
Nice to see your faces. Yeah.
And there'll be another session for virtual connection starting in about 8 minutes. Hosted by Yazamara. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. She is cool.
Thanks, students.
Thanks so much.
And we're off the air. Awesome. Thank you so much. I keep saying Kane State, and it's probably not Kane State, but oh, sorry.
Yeah, it is.
And Kim was calling Jeff George, but that's all right.
I've been called a lot of worse things.
I've been called a lot of worse things. So you should probably hang up, folks at Kane, and Mia should have sent you a link to join in.
We're live.
We're still live.
Oh, we are.